Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. I'm not one for opening statements, as I prefer to make sure that I answer all your questions, which we will certainly take the time to do today. But I do think it's important to maybe preface the questions with a few off the top thoughts, because a lot of things have been on my mind since our season's ended. And I would hope that the bulk of the questions, or at least the bulk of my answers, are going to be extremely positive. So I want to make sure to preface the positive statements with this. As I've reflected on almost every minute, certainly the minutes here at the stadium working since the season's ended, as I've reluctantly watched other teams play in postseason, while I am incredibly proud of our team on and off the field, and while I do feel confident that we've experienced such tremendous progress and have a lot to build upon from this season, I'm left with one feeling, and that's bitterness. I would say this, though, that every team that is not the team that wins the last championship season game played is bitter. And the fact that we're not playing right now leaves me more determined, and all of us here are more determined that we continue to get better. We went from the last full season played losing 95 games to winning 91 games this year. That's a lot of progress. But until we win that last game, until our players pig pile on the mound and champagne is being sprayed in the clubhouse, we're going to continue to remain committed to getting better, committed to improving, and committed to winning, not just playing in the postseason, but winning. So many good things, so many things I am incredibly proud of that I'd like to talk about, over the time we have together today. But I want to make sure that each and every one of our fans is aware that we are, if anything, more committed, more resolved, and more determined to bring a world championship to Canada. And that's the overwhelming feeling that I was left with, having to go home on that Sunday instead of continuing to play our season. So with that, we'll turn it to questions and get into the specific questions you might have regarding the season.
All right, go ahead, Gregor.
Hey, Mark, thanks as always for your time. When we would have done this back in spring training, I mean, you wouldn't have had really any idea what to expect for this upcoming season in terms of like where you guys were going to be playing, how many tickets you were going to sell. I'm sure you projected out all kinds of different scenarios, good, bad, somewhere in between. Now that the end of the season is here, where did you guys fall on that kind of spectrum in terms of your projections and where you guys ended up, and how does that impact your future finances, if at all?
Yeah, Gregory, that's fairly accurate assessment of kind of how we approached it, which is a massive number of different scenarios. I think initially, the two that we were most hopeful of were probably getting either starting the season here or getting back here and around the All-Star break. So we got back here a little bit later than that, and we were at reduced capacity, when we did get back here. As I think the one takeaway that we've learned is there is no predicting exactly what's going to happen, and we needed to be prepared and manage to some level of uncertainty. And I think where that leaves us going forward, is incredibly appreciative of the support that we've had from ownership over the last two seasons as we've endured, extremely high losses, but stayed on plan. And the continued commitment that we do that, despite recognizing that there'll probably be some continued impact next year. I'm hopeful that we'll, open, as has been the case over the last couple of weeks with sporting events here, to full capacity next year. But who knows what lies ahead, and who knows what impact it will still have on fans coming out. I think we've got a compelling product, compelling team. So the hope is that we'll see Rogers Center filled with fans, all next season.
You previously talked about the spending coming in waves, and your payroll's been bumped up each of the last 2 years. You've got a lot of money coming off the books, so obviously you're going to be spending this off season, but are you expecting another significant bump over what your payroll was at the start of this season?
Well, significance, not a term I'm going to quantify, but I'm definitely expecting, the plan again would continue to be, as the core continues to grow, and as there's clarity for us and where we need to to continue to supplement around our core, that the payroll would grow. What's not happened on plan is that our revenues would grow along with the payroll, as you noted. And it's been what's happened here historically, right? As the team achieves a level of championship expectations, the number of fans that have come out have increased, correspondingly, and that's supported the payroll. So I think what we've seen is an incredible amount of trust and belief in the plan and support from ownership that's really been unprecedented, despite the fact that we're still suffering, from the pandemic and its impact on our revenues.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Arden.
Sorry, you got me. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we got you.
There's a mute. It's a new thing on these Zoom calls. The mute.
Yeah,
button.
I know.
Yeah.
2 years in, still doing this. You mentioned 91 wins is a really good result, right, for your season. But if you actually, if you look at that through the prism of, say, run differential, that actually strongly suggests that you ought to have won more than you did. Can you just chalk that up to the challenges of the first 4 months of the season, Dunedin and Buffalo, or are there other reasons you think that this team kind of underperformed in the win column?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd say we underperformed. It's hard to consider 91 wins underperforming, but there were the number of wins not corresponding to the run differential. There are a multitude of reasons for that. Certainly bullpen, is one of those reasons that caused some disconnect from run differential at times. When you miss the playoffs, you tend to reflect on a lot of different things that occur. It's hard for me not to think we would have been in the playoffs had we been home all year long, because we got to see the impact of our fans. We got to see the impact of our players being in a place that they feel truly is a home and operating under those circumstances. And we were able to reflect a little bit on, despite the fact that we endured incredible support from the communities in Dunedin and Buffalo and the front offices, and the governments, local governments, we really got to see how challenging it was to play in those facilities and to play in those environments rather than being back in Canada and back in Toronto. So we endured a lot. If anything, our players this year, Arden, showed just what perseverance, determination, just what no excuses actually looks like. And I couldn't be more proud and couldn't think of a better representation of the attributes and values and characteristics and traits that we're looking to have our players, demonstrate day in and day out. I really think we'll be able to build upon that in the seasons to come.
And then looking forward to this offseason, obviously with the CBA expiring on December 1st, there's some uncertainty just as to what the systems are going to look like going forward. Does that prevent you from doing anything substantial until you have some more certainty just as to what the next CBA is going to look like?
No, listen, right now we've got so much off-season planning to do that is not impacted or very little impacted by what shape the CBA takes. The things that I think could be impacted by the CBA, and we're obviously aware of what those things could be, are probably less what might happen in free agency and trades. So it's other areas, of our operation that may be impacted, and we can certainly maintain agility. Right now, I'm feeling pretty good about the commissioner being so confident that a deal will get done by December 1st, and more aware that we've got a tremendous amount of work to get done to prepare for a very important offseason. And it's business as usual for us right now, Arden.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Shai.
Hey, Mark, hope you're well.
Hey, Shai.
When you were responding to Gregor's question, you mentioned the traditional correlation between payroll and revenues and the way those go hand in hand. And obviously, there's been the impact, as you discussed, and expecting to be some level of impact next year as well. I'm wondering, is the amount that the payroll is going to rise, is it going to kind of stay on plan, or is it going to perhaps be rising at a different rate because of the reduction of revenues over the past 2 years?
Yeah, well, I'd say two things to that. One, the kind of choreography of our offseason, Shy, leaves our final payroll meeting with ownership, still about a month away. So, I like to think I'm making those decisions unilaterally. I'm certainly not. We've got to make our proposal. But every indication I've received, and I think every indication that we've been shown, which is, a demonstration of consistent and strong support, along with us fulfilling our end of that bargain, which is demonstrating that the team continues to improve and we continue to perform on the field, as well as a front office and on the business side. Leaves me to believe that we will stay on plan and the payroll will continue to rise, despite the fact that, we're still lagging behind it a little bit in revenues due to, uncontrollable circumstances.
Okay. And second, I wanted to just follow up. You mentioned bitterness as a feeling that you're carrying, kind of looking back on the season. And I understand pulling off trades midseason is difficult, and the prices are sometimes, just simply not what you want to pay. But I'm wondering, in hindsight, is there a takeaway from maybe not being able to act sooner to augment the bullpen that perhaps may apply to in season next season, or some sort of takeaway from that in terms of how you may operate moving forward?
No, not really. I'm not sure I've seen a better, season of work from a collective baseball operation from Ross and Mike and Joe and Andrew and, our entire front office. And you think about, the free agents that we've signed, the trade for Steven Matz, you think about adjusting in the bullpen with Trevor Richards and Simber and, trying to make trades early in a season. There's just not a precedent for that. Those trades are just, you can't give me more than a handful over a decade of those trades that are done. So those are times when you'd like to have more internal alternatives that are maybe ready to come up and contribute. And, but it is tough. The bullpen is a tough area. It's mercurial. There are almost no teams that year in and year out, build dominant bullpens. And it is almost certain you're going to have to adapt and adjust as the season goes along. So, I'd like to think we'll have a better bullpen next year, and that will probably end up showing that we have some other weakness that we're unaware of right now. And what I can tell you and what I can guarantee you is there'll be some area of adjustment that we need to make during the season next year. It will not be a perfect season where the team is, kind of push and play and there's nothing to do. We're going to have to make adjustments. And I think our guys did not only a good job of building a strong team at the outset, but then adjusting as the season went along. Again, 91 wins with playing in 3 different places. I'd say we would have won a lot more games if we had been here all year long.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Steve.
Mark, your management group had maybe the winter of their dreams last year. Getting Springer, getting Semien, getting Matz, getting I'm missing one here.
Robbie Ray.
3 of whom are now free agents. How do you now match that going into this winter with a guy who had an MVP year, a guy who had a Cy Young year, and a pitcher nobody expected to do what he did?
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve. I guess what I would say is I'm confident in the body of work and confident in the approach. Obviously, we would love to sign all 3 of those guys back. I can talk about each of them and how strongly we feel about them as teammates, as performers, as players, and as people. And they're guys that we're going to go into the market and compete for. But I'm not a believer that you have to sign anyone back. I'm a believer that you have to get better. And as I sit down with Ross and, sit in on our meetings of preparation, there are multiple ways for that to happen. We'll have the resources to do it, both in, young talent that we could trade and in payroll. So I guess what I'd say is I'm confident, it may not be in the exact same shape and form, Steve, but we're going to get better. We'll find a way to do it.
On another matter entirely, when you watch the Red Sox play or the Atlanta Braves play right now, what do you see in those teams at this time of year that your team is missing?
Nothing. I think what I see is, what I've always felt, just get in. Just get in, because if you're hot at the right time and you're playing your best baseball at the right time, your record during the season doesn't necessarily matter. You can win a World Series. So while I did open by saying we'll be bitter until we win the final game played, the continued pursuit is going to be get into the playoffs, just get into the playoffs, because anything can happen. I do feel like when I watch these teams play, not those two in particular, but all of them, that if we had found a way to get in, that we were going to be a team that would have been very tough, in the postseason. So we need to find a way to get better next year, to build off 91 wins and to get 92 or 93 wins at least and get in.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ben.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for the time. Actually, just jumping off your answer there, do you think 92 or 93 wins is enough in the American League East? Do you guys feel like you have to almost?
Man, I hope so. I hope so. People talk to me about winning 91, not getting in. Unfortunately, I experienced in 2005, winning 92 games and not getting in. And I'd like to say that I was able to turn the page quickly. And I did. And listen, I can turn the page quickly and just lose myself in work, which is easy to do. But the fact that I can recall that feeling so clearly of winning 92 and not getting in 2005, that leads me to believe I'm going to remember this year for a long time as well, just because the team was so good and believed so strongly in the group of guys that we had. But I do think, we need to continue to build. I'm encouraged by that improvement from 95 losses to 91 wins. I feel like we've still got players on the rise and still have players coming that are left to contribute, and the ability to add players from the outside that can complement this team as well. So what the right number is, I don't know, but building off 91 means you're going to win 92 or 93. And I guess I'm confident that almost every year, those are numbers that are going to get you into postseason.
For sure. And then with respect to spending, like you said, that you anticipate having the flexibility to continue doing that. I guess looking ahead, there are a lot of variables that are impossible to predict, including where the CBT would sit. But, looking forward to 23, 24, as some of your players get more expensive, is that on the table for this organization to be able to push up toward that CBT, something that it hasn't done in the past?
That's not something I've thought a lot about. I'm not sure with how we're currently constructed. We've got the revenues to support a team that goes over the CBT. That's not to say that ownership doesn't make the strategic decision at some point to go over. But I feel like we can continue to raise the payroll as we already have to unprecedented levels, and that our team and our fans and this city and this incredible market, which is a country, can support us continuing to raise it. So, but those are things that we'd have to determine whether there are revenue sources outside that we have not currently tapped into or mined, if we're gonna get into those areas, or a level of maybe proactively deficit spending that our ownership deemed to be a strategic decision. So, but it's not something that we're planning for, Ben, as we sit here and look at the payrolls moving out.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
Go ahead, Rob.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Rob.
Thanks for the time today. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Recognizing that it's really an ongoing process. You talk about the transition from 95 losses to 91 wins, but where does that put you on sort of whatever your arc would be towards building a consistent playoff contender? And I guess with that in mind, is there more of an urgency this offseason than the past couple? And does that factor into your presentation to ownership when you're trying to set a budget?
Yeah, man, that word urgency for me is a core one. I think I felt urgency the first day on the job here in late 2015, and I feel it waking up this morning. We've got an incredibly talented young core that now has some experience playing meaningful games late in the season over the last 2 years, that are hungry to win, that want to win, and probably that means more than anything to them right now, that have been benefited by being around some elite veteran players like Marcus Semien and George Springer that have postseason experience and have impacted our players. We're at a really good point where we're talking about making a 1 or 2 game or a 3 game improvement, not a 10 game or a 15 or a 20 game leap. Some of that I think can come organically from the players that are here, and some will continue to come from the work done by Ross and our group to add players that continue to improve the probability of that happening.
You mentioned Springer, and I think the impact of him was pretty obvious when he was healthy. But what influence did you see from him beyond what we saw on the field? And what does a 150 game George Springer bring, do you think, as opposed to an 81 game George Springer?
Maybe those 2 or 3 wins. I mean, he's clearly, one of the best players in the game when he's on the field. We saw that, when he was healthy and playing. Certainly when he truly did come back and had time to kind of get, in the rhythm and, in the timing of the game. And he's a player that's performed on the biggest stages, as we talked about last year when we signed him. So sure like to give him that ability to be on that stage again on those biggest stages. But I think what he brings is, some similar things to Vladdy, in that he brings a joy for playing the game. He has fun playing, which is really important for a game that when you play 162 times and there are so many ups and downs, and, that little bit of ability to have fun and joy despite the roller coaster ride you're going to be on, is so important, and can be a differentiator, in this game. So the experience, the joy, the fun, and the elite athleticism and talent, those are the things I saw from him this year, and I'm excited to see over a full season next year.
Good. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Julia.
Hey, Mark, thanks for doing this. You mentioned that your team showed a lot of resilience in making adjustments this season. From your standpoint, both logistically and emotionally, what do you take away from it? What did you learn from this unique season?
Yeah, I think what I learned is what we've been hoping, to build, which is, the realities of sports in general, really life and leadership and high pressure environments, are that you're going to be given a host of reasons, and they're going to probably be real. They're going to be objective, why you shouldn't perform, why you shouldn't achieve. This year we were handed layups. We were handed, hey, just take a pass on this season. You can just accept the fact that you were dealt a hand that no one else was dealt with. Everybody had challenges, but you had challenges. You played as the visiting team, booed loudly in Dunedin for every game down there. You faced, a hostile Yankee crowd and Red Sox crowd in Buffalo, and, living out of hotels and temporary housing, never really knowing where the next 20 games were going to be played. Our players and staff and front office had every reason to say, hey, let's just wait till next year. We still have a young core. A lot of good things are happening. There's no reason to panic. And I even heard, industry experts saying that, don't worry about these Blue Jays. They're so talented. They're going to be fine next year. They had to deal with this. Our guys didn't accept that. They didn't take the excuses. They took the attitude of, it is what it is, not what it should be. And we just have to find a way to get better. And so I do think that we will build upon that, perseverance. We'll build upon that resilience, that will be a trademark, of this team moving forward, that we endured things that no one else had to endure, that we're not going to make excuses. If someone gets hurt next year, something unexpected will happen. It's inevitable. Something unexpected is going to happen. And when you play 162 games, they're ready for whatever could happen. And so I think that you're going to see a group of kind of battle-tested players that are prepared for any uncertainty that might come, and maybe tougher than every other team, maybe more determined than every other team, and more thankful for being home for a whole season.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Mark, thanks so much for doing this.
Sure.
Good to see you. Just sort of coming off Arden's question about the CBA a little bit and the CBA negotiations, and you talked about sort of being able to move ahead in free agency and trades. I'm wondering if any of the discussions you have or will plan on having with Vladdy and Bo about an extension, about some sort of long-term deal, does that need to wait until the CBA is done, so you have a better idea whether or not there's going to be any service time changes or anything like that?
Not necessarily. I think it's more a question of us managing the amount of work we have to do and where the different priorities of the season fit in from a timing perspective. And there's only so much bandwidth that a front office has, Jeff, that has to think about, prepping out a free agent class, exploring trades, and extending multi-year offers to your own internal players. So there's more urgency to the things that have an expiration date, and a little less urgency. The end of spring training is kind of the expiration date on, you'd rather talks not bleed into a season. So again, I think it's more about balancing workload and looking at timeframes than it is about anything having to do with the CBA.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Laura.
Hey, Mark, thanks for taking the time. I wondered, given the reports yesterday about Major League Baseball providing housing to minor league players, you can give us any sense of what that might look like early, like off the top here.
Yeah. I think that, look, it's something we talked about at the last owners meeting. And I'm sure you're aware, Laura, we've talked about it. That is something that we're happy to hear. It's something that we were proactively already thinking about every possible way to support our minor league players, to help them be the best they can be mentally, physically, and fundamentally, and certainly understand the challenges that the economic system present for minor league players. We proactively increased minor league salaries ahead of every other team in Major League Baseball. And we not only welcome, but embrace the opportunity to provide them with housing as well. So what that looks like logistically, I'm the wrong person to ask for that. I'm not spending my time thinking about, finding apartments for players in Dunedin, but I can tell you that we have Charlie Wilson and, Joe Sclafani and the rest of our minor league staff are actively working on that. And it's something that we're excited about and we feel, happy to embrace.
When you see, protests from minor league players or some players speaking out about the conditions that they've lived in, and maybe not, necessarily to your club, but how does that affect your perspective of the minor leagues, and how do you want to see it continue to grow here?
I think it has progressed. When I think back to when I came into the game, how minor league players were supported and treated, it's remarkable, that they were able to survive those standards. So it's continued to progress. The understanding of the challenges that exist within the framework of both minor league salaries and resources. Those things have dramatically increased, and the changes to the minor league system were largely meant to help us continue to grow those things. So I think we're on the right trajectory. But we still have a ways to go to ensure that those players have, the capability and ability to, provide for their families in a way that doesn't put a strain, outside of the game.
Thanks, Mark.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks for doing this, Mark. Good to see you. I wonder if this year, you think, when you look back at the 91 wins and the development and the move from 95, and I know in sports things can change obviously pretty quickly, but do you think that this year should be considered almost the floor or the baseline for what this team should be expected to do over the course of the next few years?
I don't tend to think that way. I know when we're sitting down and kind of thinking about projecting, the number of wins that we've got organically on our roster, the number of wins we've got to add from external and supplementing, around our team. The expectation that we're going to build a championship caliber team. The expectation will be we build a team capable of winning the World Series next year. I think that kind of answers your question, right? We're not looking at zoning in on a certain number, but we're looking at getting better, and getting better means improving upon 91 wins. Getting better means, having the ability to not just win those games, but play deep into postseason or all the way through postseason. So again, I'm not fixated on a number. I'm fixated on us getting better.
I wasn't specifically referring to a number, but sort of like being in the race to the last day and playing meaningful baseball all the way through to the end, if not achieving the postseason. Like, is that clearly you're talking about how you expect even more than that, but is this what you expect for the next little while?
I expect us to keep getting better. I guess that's what I'd say. I think we've got an organization full of people, in uniform, in the office, on the business side, on the baseball side, and most importantly, players who are committed to, finding ways to improve, finding ways to compete at a higher level, and finding ways to get better. So I genuinely, while I'm not fixating on being specific with, what that goal looks like, the goal is to get better definitively. So you can take that, with what we did this year, you can take that and say the goal is to get better next year.
Okay. And I wanted to ask, you talked a lot about the culture and how wonderful people you want to bring in and that sort of thing. It seems like Marcus Semien got some unbelievable reviews from his teammates for the behind the scenes stuff that he did during the season, the things they learned by watching him and from him. Is that, how much of a value add is that when you look at someone who's looking for a new contract?
So two things. One, I just comment on Marcus and just say that, as I've sat and talked with Ross, kind of thought about our collective decades of experience watching players, that he's one of the more unique guys that we've been able to observe and experience. I've seldom seen a tougher guy, that plays every single day, that works harder than him, that's more committed to being a consistent, dependable, reliable player and teammate. He is certainly a role model for all of us in the way we approach our jobs, and for our players in the way they approach, their jobs as well. So it was a pleasure to watch him work, compete, and play this year, and exist in our environment as well. So, and yes, I think we've always placed a premium, not on character and, on the teammate that a player is. We will continue to do that. Marcus isn't the only player. We've got some great guys in our clubhouse that demonstrate a lot of those qualities and attributes already here. And either through bringing Marcus back or finding other players, that will be a part of the equation to us. It'll be part of what we factor in.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll do final follow-ups here. Go ahead, Shai.
Hey, Mark, just to circle back a little bit to the revenue piece. And I'm just wondering, in terms of sort of projecting out revenues for next year, when you guys came back, you obviously had some unique circumstances going into the market, selling nothing, full amount of tickets, and you were right in the race and in an exciting period. I'm wondering what you're taking from what maybe some of the NHL clubs are experiencing right now in terms of not selling out immediately out of the gate. Do you see anything applicable to your business there? And are there some other external factors in terms of ticket sales beyond governmental restrictions that you're sort of keeping track of when trying to figure out what you may be working with next year?
Yeah, I think the question, Shai, is there's no question that there is some lag effect on, people's comfort, in coming out in a sold out stadium and environment. There's no question that it's going to take time for the demand to fully recover. I think we'll be able to speed that time frame up because of how exciting and compelling our team is to watch, and where we're going to, what the expectations are going to be for us next year. What I would caution is looking at anything now and saying that has any relevance in April. And I mean, April, what we've learned is April could be, we could be a world away from this in April, or something surprising could happen in April that's an unanticipated challenge. So I can tell you one thing, I'm not going to forecast, what April looks like. I just, hope that things continue to improve. And if they do, I expect us to, may not be right back to 2016 and 15 levels, but I expect us to be quickly growing towards those levels here.
All right. And when follow up on the reply you gave to Ben, you mentioned some of the challenges sort of generating enough revenue to be a CBT club. And understanding the world that we're in and some of the changes that have happened, what would need to happen for this market, being one of the larger ones in North America, to get to the point where it could be approaching the CBT, and how much of a factor is currency in that?
It is a definite factor. I'm comfortable with how I answered the question, thus far, and I'm happy to sit down with you one-on-one and talk about that in the future. But now is not the time for me to get into a macroeconomic conversation about the Blue Jays revenues and what that may look like moving forward. I think it's time to reflect upon the season that we just had and reflect upon the off season coming up. But, you and I can certainly sit and talk macroeconomics from a history major's perspective at any point that you want.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Go ahead, Gregor.
Hey, Mark. I asked this to Ross, but I wanted to get your take on it too. I mean, you guys are, on one hand, you guys are trying to upgrade this roster and build a contender for next year to get into the postseason. On the other hand, you've kind of got to maintain some flexibility to keep paying your young players as they get through some of your more expensive arbitration years, and as they get closer to free agency. How fine of a line is that to balance, and how do you kind of counteract that? Do you need to focus more on short-term deals this offseason? How do you balance the here and now versus a couple of years down the road?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, but that's a core part of the job that Ross, and his entire group are going to be thinking about on a daily basis. That is the definition of roster management. That's what roster management is. It's thinking about how you maintain a balanced roster, not just from an economic perspective, from a talent perspective, so that we don't age all at once, so that we've got young players continuing to transition in that balance out both the upside, in performance, even though, and their volatility is balanced off by the dependability and reliability of players in the prime or veteran players, as well as economically, so that we can afford the payroll. So we're never thinking about any move we make other than a one-year deal in isolation. We're always thinking about, okay, what will this mean for our younger players as they progress through the economic system? What will it mean for players coming off the books in the years ahead? And as we consider additions to the roster, Gregor, that's what you described is exactly what we'll be thinking about. We'll be thinking about managing a roster so that we don't reach any inflection point where things are dictated to us, or we still have the ability to kind of make some decisions and have some flexibility and adjust to the things that we're not certain of yet that will certainly occur, in the future.
Sure. And then just really quickly on the CBA, you might not be able to get into this too much, but are there any specific asks that you guys have from the Blue Jays in terms of this market? Maybe some of the challenges that you guys are facing that you guys are asking for in the CBA, and if so, are you able to share what they might be?
Just that we were given an opportunity over the last year to make specific asks as they pertain to rules, to economic guidelines and market specific, conditions and circumstances. We've had, consistent input and dialogue. Those are things that, part of my job is to continue to lobby for the Toronto Blue Jays, while also being, an active member of MLB. So, and that's always a balance. So not going to get into specifics there, but tell you that we've had every opportunity to provide that feedback and input.
Thanks, Mark.
Go ahead, Ben.
You kind of hinted at this, I think, Mark, when you're answering about Marcus Semien and the value that he brings off the field. But I'm wondering, like, as you look to add wins, is it just a matter of adding wins to the roster, projected wins, or are there aspects within that really appeal to you, whether it's handedness or youth or certain attributes that a pitcher might have? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there are things that when you watch us play every day, when you look at the analysis that, our research and development group does at the end of the year, there are things that you say right now they would improve us, right? We could have more balance in our lineup, both with handedness and approach. We could have more experience and reliability in our bullpen. We could replace some of the production that's coming off the books in our free agents. But I would caution that just solving those problems will usually result in another set of problems coming up, that we're unaware of right now. And there will be things when you sit and talk to Ross in 6 months or 8 months, there will be things that come up that we are not considering right now. So some ability to adjust on the fly is really important through either players in your system, through trades, through some financial flexibility. There will be things that we have to do that we're not expecting right now. But what we will do, Ben, is continue to take the information that we have, the information that we can project, and continue to look to find ways to get better. And that some of that will be through those things I mentioned that you suggested as well.
Sounds good. Makes sense.
Take our last one here from Martin.
Mark, it's kind of weird to have one of these without asking you about construction and Dunedin or Buffalo or whatever. So I guess I'm curious if there's any infrastructure priorities this winter, or if it's kind of status quo going into 22.
Yeah, no, I think, listen, we continue to know that the stadium that I'm sitting in right now is a long-term issue that's been put on hold, due to the pandemic. But we continue to invest short-term in the stadium. So we will have a new scoreboard next year. That's news. We have not announced that prior. There'll be a brand new scoreboard. Last year we did the sound system and the turf, as well as numerous other smaller things. But the big one next year will be the scoreboard, along with continuing to look at ways to improve the concourse experience and look for any opportunity we can to increase fan experience. But at some point, Arden, we've got a bigger issue that we've got to address, which, at this point, we've taken care of Dunedin. We've got a new hitting lab on board in Dunedin that will not have been in place until this season coming up. It's being built right now. That's the final piece of our Dunedin project until we think about what the next thing we can do down there is, which won't take long. But the biggest kind of capital project that's left for the Blue Jays to consider is, how do we either address, Rogers Center through a significant renovation or a new stadium at some point. That's not immediate, but it's one when you think about the long-term horizon of the Blue Jays, we're going to need to address that at some point.
And just speaking of Dunedin, being kind of a year into having the PDC down there, like what have you kind of learned about how to best maximize that facility over the last year, both like not only in the winter, but during the season as well?
I hope to be able to answer that more a year from now, because we, in all candor, we have been limited to how we've been able to use that building because of health and safety and respecting the conditions of the pandemic and how we had to use it from a spacing perspective. We are running programs right now, for our player development system, which I think will allow us over the next 3 months to use it as we've never used it before. But what I did see when we were in there is that combination of technology, space, resources, coaching, all converging through an environment and design that was constructed for the purpose of, best in class development that maximizes our talent. What I haven't seen is an off season that's a normal off season where we're able to have our players move there and have 100 guys in January. So my hope is that's what you see in January, that you see 100, 120, 115 players, all down in Dunedin training, taking advantage of our coaching, resources, technology, like we've never had before.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.